welcome to Smith and Grezzy. We've got hopefully another treat for you this week. We've got the one and only Morgan Griffiths, who was a euphonium player in bands with me and Sandy. We'd like to get from Morgan how he got started from playing, and what various bands he played in, some of his highlights, and things like that, and his philosophy on playing and conducting. So welcome, Morgan, from me and Sandy.
Welcome, mate. How you doing?
You too. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you both.
Right, let's hit the ground running, because what we've done a podcast with Alan Morrison,
Yes.
and one with Kevin Crockford. Big question: how many Opens, Nationals, and Europeans have you got? Show us your medals.
Oh, go on then. So, well, 3 British Opens,
right?
3 British Opens, 2 Nationals, and then 7 Europeans. Yeah,
that's all right. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, not so
I'll
bad.
get that in quick. Yeah. So, what we've done is just, where did it all start for you? Because I know, but we all have a similar sort of background in as much as the people that influenced us early on. But tell us how you got started into banding and how it all came about.
Well, I was always, to be honest, I was involved with banding. I mean, my dad obviously was a conductor of the Yorkshire Bus Company band in the days when I first started, and really, as I didn't know anything else other than that. We used to go to concerts and all that from being in the pram, I guess. I mean, we used to take us to concerts and things like that. So
I tell you what, Morgan, today I had a look at your dad's record. It's quite prolific, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, actually. There was 50 years of the Yorkshire Bus Company a few years ago, and actually did a record of all his wins. And they also say you lose more than you win, and in fact, he's probably won more than he lost. Yeah.
Well, he's one guy you can certainly go up to and get a straight, honest opinion. I've always felt that about Ted.
Yeah, but he's again, he is a bit like you, Mark. He is still so passionate about banding. I know the times I come down to Hammonds band room, and your dad's always there,
Yes.
And straight away he's in. He wants to talk about stuff. He's still full of it and enthusiastic about everything. So did you ask to get started, or did your dad basically say, right, you're joining the band and that's it? Or were you given a choice, or was it your choice?
Well, to be honest, we're all around it. So I used to be friends with everyone in the band. And the thing with the Yorkshire Bus Company band, obviously, one thing they used to get was a free coach through the company. So they were literally out all the time. So they literally I mean, they used to do 2 contests in a day sometimes and things like. I mean, they were just a contest band, that were it. And so because they got a free coach, literally they just went everywhere. So they used to be out all the time, And I was just brought up with it everywhere you went, and then. Really, when I was about 7, I started playing cornet. But it wasn't that long before I was actually playing in the band on third cornet. Because, I mean, my first sort of contest in memory with that band was back in 1981 when they won the 3rd section national finals back in Kensington Town Hall on Vizcaya by Gilbert Winter.
Right.
And of course, they drew number 1, of course, which was a bit of a story with my dad. He's very good at drawing
your dad's
number 1s.
He's drawn the most prolific. He's by way on his own as the most prolific drawer of number 1 draws. It's he's unbelievable.
Still let him do it for the band, do you?
No, Edward
still
doing
it
now. But no, Edward did it, but then he got a number 1 just recently at the Open last year. So
all right,
he started off really well. No, maybe not. So really, I started with that, with the bus company. They used to do, and I used to play all the time. We just literally play all the time. I mean, probably before I should have even been in that band. I mean, they were like a 3rd section band, the old 3rd section at the time.
Yeah.
But it was a great grounding, I mean, the thing was they used to play, and the pieces they used to play, I mean, even though they were a 3rd section band, they used to play some fantastic repertoire. And they used to play all the sort of new test pieces that were out at the time. So you'd be playing Connotations and Vida Matlow and things like this in rehearsals. So all the classic things. They did. I mean, they didn't always play them in contests, but they always played them in rehearsals. And you got used to playing them kind of pieces. And funnily enough, things like Rhapsody Brass used to play a lot. And then, funnily enough, that was the first piece I ended up playing with Black Dyke, as it happened. So there you go.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Quality repertoire there. Yeah,
all the time, really. Yeah, and I mean, we used to play all the, the big pieces, even though, they weren't playing them out in concert, but they knew them, they were playing them and things like that. So we're always playing good stuff,
So Morgan, you were a cornet player originally, weren't you?
That's right. Yes, I didn't really want to play cornet, to be honest. My dad
No.
wanted me to be a top cornet player, you know. But I didn't. It wasn't really my thing. I mean, Geraint played cornet for a little bit, but he was more
Yeah.
stubborn than me, so he got to play trombone, which he wanted to do. And I sort of did what my dad said for a while
with
until.
a cornet in his hand at all. Geraint.
So
No,
how did Euphonium come about then?
Well, to be honest, it was more of not an accident. I also wanted to play Euphonium, to be honest with you, but I ended up having an accident where I split my lip actually, and I lost the feeling in the front of my lip, so I couldn't actually. The range of the cornet was really diminished, so I couldn't really play that well on it. So eventually, I finally got the chance to play the Euphonium, which I always wanted to do. And again, that was at the Bus Country Band. So I joined on second Euphonium, but then the solo Euphonium left and went to another band. So I literally had 6 months on my own. And after that, I never. And that actually was the best thing ever, because we were just literally thrown in the deep end and just had to do it, you know. And after that, they got a second Euphonium because it ended up I was better than the ones coming down, you know. So that's how it ended up going to Euphonium, yeah.
And was your dad your teacher at this early stage?
He was, yeah. I mean, the thing we used to do a lot was slow melody competitions and things like that. I mean, from my first one, I must have been only 8. I think when I did my first one, I won my first one actually at Sheffley. John Clay was the judge. I remember it. And we used to go and in them days you could go literally every weekend. We used to go to a slow melody or two, and we used to go all over the place. I mean, round, you know, there were things in the Midlands and literally all the time. Quartet contests as well. We used to do that a lot and all this sort of stuff. So literally we used to play all the time. Yeah, air vary contests, but mainly slow melodies. To be honest, there were a lot. There are a lot of them around the circuit.
That's something you don't get now. The quartet contests. I was the same. You learn so much from doing that small ensemble stuff.
Yeah,
you know, it's one of the hardest things. I mean, we did a thing with we did one of Roy Newsom's vintage brass concerts with YBS at the time, and we had to do a quartet. We had to do Concordia and Pre-Show, so we had to do in the concert. And it was Ian Porthouse, Ewan Williams, me, and Shona. And we're all sat there thinking, "Geez, this is really hard work." Just to play the quartet, it was great. And it was really nerve-wracking, to be honest. It was brilliant, though. Yeah, it really was.
Well, they used to at Black Dyke years ago. They used to have an octet, didn't they? And that was for a grounding. You know, I mean, they were seasoned players, but they obviously enjoyed playing in a smaller group as well.
Yeah, I did a few octet jobs when I was there. They were still had all
Black
that old repertoire, you know. Yeah.
So eventually, you did your stint at Yorkshire Bus Company. How old were you when you left there, Morgan?
Well, I mean, you talk about teachers, because obviously, once I went into Euphonium, my dad took me to Jeff Whittam, who knew Jeff because my dad played many years for Meltham Band, and Jeff, when he was resident at Black Dyke at the time, but he also took Meltham on competitions and things like that. So he knew Jeff, and basically he wanted to take me somewhere to do with Black Dyke, basically, because that was his band, you know, that he looked up to and all that sort of thing. So that's when I started with Jeff, which I would have been 15 then when I went to Euphonium, when I started going there. And to be honest, that was just fantastic. I mean, just to have lessons with Jeff, it was always we didn't know how to do a lot. We did sometimes more talking than playing sometimes.
Well, I think we've all at one stage had lessons off Jeff. Mine were quite unforgettable.
Yeah, I mean, when I came down to college first, and I joined Black Dyke almost straight away, and Jeff was my teacher. And like you say, you know, you go into lessons and say, right, what have you got for me this week, lad? And you were left to take the onus of you know, well, I've done this, I've prepped this, Jeff, I've done this Arbin study, or I've done this solo, or whatever. But he would, and then he would talk. He would just talk. But it was so useful to me when I joined Dyke because of the advice he gave you, you know, and he helped you sort of get steeped in that, what was expected of you from that band as a collective unit, what your everything about you, your playing, your demeanour, your thoughts, the way that you went about things. And he was fantastic. And he was so knowledgeable as well. And again, he was one of them. He didn't mince his words, did he? If he didn't like what you were doing, he would tell you. And And you know, and if you got a little bit of praise out of him, you thought, oh, this must be actually be quite good then, you know. But it was
Well, it never really happened, did it? I mean, it just didn't.
Such a great bloke, yeah.
It just never did. I mean, that's the thing. It would tell you what's wrong with things, and that was an old Dyke thing. You know, they'd tell you what's wrong, but if they didn't say anything, you knew it was right. So that was it.
Exactly.
You know, and that's where they used to do it. You know, and the last one with Jeff, I mean, the first one we used to do were half an hour long notes before we did anything. You know, I mean, they had this particular warm up we used to do, which I've still got somewhere. They wrote it out.
The same one.
Me and you still use that same warm up, Morgan.
Yeah, I do.
I've used it. Yeah.
Have you got it as well, Sandy?
Yeah, exact same ones. Yeah, and we used to do it all the time. Yeah,
and it's you know, getting the basics right and sound, wasn't it? That was the main thing with Jeff.
Proper old-fashioned teaching, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it.
You were just made to. You were made to do these things and it was all about the sound, wasn't it? Everything that he mentioned was all about the noise you made.
Yeah, that's it, and that's what you used to do half an hour of that before we did anything, you know. And he knew if you hadn't done them, you know. And you got told as well if you hadn't done them.
So what was the? Where did you go after the bus band?
Well, after that, because once I started with Jeff, he was taking Brodsworth Colliery at the time. Was Jeff? He was conducting them, so he got me to go there, which I did about 6 months at Brodsworth on second euphonium because he just felt that I needed a better band, and also, as he used to say, to learn your trade on second euphonium, you know, because he says you can't sit on the end unless you know what the second euphonium role's like, and that was, and so I got he took me there.
I've got no doubt, Morgan, you met Cliff Hopes there.
Cliff was solo euphonium, yeah, he was,
Wow.
Yeah, side of Cliff, a few others in the band, no, Cliff was solo euphonium, yeah, that's right. So I played at side of Cliff. And then really that Christmas, it came about that Hammonds needed a second euphonium. And at the time, Richard Evans had just started with them because they'd gone through that sort of transition period there. And then Chris Wood had just joined, Billy Rushworth had joined on solo horn, and they're sort of building the band back together. And then Brian Crooks was on solo euphonium, who used to play at Leyland. And to be honest, I just said to Jeff, what do you think? And he said, that'd be a good experience to play outside of him. I didn't realise Jeff was actually leaving the band that Christmas, so as it turned out, yes, at the same time, but he didn't tell me this. So yes, I did about 6 months, did the mime workers with them, and they played Derek Bourgeois' Diversions with Major Parks. This Major Parks was the conductor, the professional conductor at the time.
Right.
And Jeff ended up playing bass actually on that, funnily enough. So
I do have a memory of that. I remember him carrying an E-flat bass through Blackpool Winter Gardens.
That's it.
I do have a memory.
Used to get it in the garden and put a hose through it and blow stuff out in the back garden. My goodness, yeah. So that was that, and then I moved on to Hammonds. But I said I didn't know Jeff was actually leaving Brodsworth at the same time. So and then I went to Hammonds from then on, and then really I've been there on and off ever since, really.
I remember Black Dyke were looking for a solo euphonium. Robert Childs had left the band.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Sandy, if you remember, we were struggling to find somebody, weren't we? And I remember Jacko saying to me, he says, you used to live with Steve and me, didn't you? I says, yeah. Give him a ring, see if he's got any interest. So I ring Stephen. We had a lovely conversation. He said, you know, obviously his solo career was taking off big style. And he says, but there's one young lad I heard at the Music for Schools, I think he said, down at Guildhall. Nice. I said, who's that? He says, Morgan Griffiths, I think his name is. So I thought nothing of it. Anyway, that about 2 weeks after, I depped with Hammonds, and you played a solo, Facilita.
That's right, yeah.
I remember it clear as day.
St. Helens somewhere, yeah.
And I went back up to Jacko's. We were still looking for a euphonium. And one day I says, I heard this euphonium play the other day. And also, to give it some credence, I said, Stephen Meads told us to look out for it.
Recommended, yeah.
Yeah. And so I says, so Jacko being Jacko, he says, well, where's he play? I says, his second euphonium at Hammonds. He went, give over, he says. You can't come from second euphonium at Hammonds to Black Dyke. You're talking rubbish, lad. I says, you've got to hear him to appreciate what I'm on about. Anyway, I think he got hold of your number somehow.
He did, yeah, yeah.
Did he call you and arrange to meet up with you?
Well, I'm just trying to think how it come out, because I obviously knew Jim Shepherd pretty well at the time, because he used to do quite a lot with JS, with Jim. And obviously through Jeff, they were big friends anyway. They used to always be met. And actually Jim were playing a little bit with Hammonds at the time as well. And then Derek, them two were big friends anyway. And it's sort of so Derek rung me to come up for audition, but I don't think he realised I was second euphonium at the time. I think that came out later. I think he found out later that, because I think he thought I was solo euphonium. He probably didn't know.
Well, were telling me off for it.
Right, yeah. Well, then obviously Jeff. I asked Jeff, of course, what his advice was. He said, "Oh, a good experience, so all this, you see." So we'd been doing Remington's Carmel of Venice, which he gave me actually lessons, because that was the manuscript version then, which was given to him by Bert Sullivan apparently back in the day. So he got that manuscript set back, because no one else had that particular arrangement at the time. So he said at one day, he says, "When's he good enough, we'll do this, So we used to work on that a lot, So that was a solo I used to play. Well, very often actually, and I did it. That's where Stephen Mead would have heard me. I did it. I won a solo contest somewhere doing it. Yeah, and then obviously, and then came up an audition, but I didn't expect to. I wasn't expecting to get the job,
I'm sure Sandy will agree with me here. It was the single best audition I've ever heard in my life. Do you remember it, Sandy?
Yeah, I do, and it was quite. The thing that I remember striking me about it was that oh God, he's going to get dead embarrassed now. But we've been used to like John Clough, and then Bob there, big projected sounds, but without being over the top, And Morgan suddenly came, and he was like, I don't know if this is true or not, but it struck me as being, this is what John Clough must have been like when he was 19-year-old or something, this passionate sound and the way that it rode the band without being overwhelming. I think sometimes today you hear players and they're sort of, they've got big open sounds that can ride the band, but they sort of lay it on with a trowel a bit. The likes of Cloughy and Morgan, for me, they knew when to do it and they knew when not to do it, and they could vary it all, And it struck me at the time.
That's the challenge. That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, John. Particularly, John was a massive hero of mine, and hearing him live was just fantastic. And obviously I sat beside him as well. He sat beside me both ways at Hammonds as well. So you saw him up close as well, But actually, the one thing with John, when you get away from the sound, the projection of the sound you could get was
the projection, wasn't it? And you thought, how the heck you would hear recordings, or you would hear it in concerts, you'd be sat there in amongst it, and you think, how the hell's he? He's riding the band there, but it's not obtrusive, it's not dominating, but it's just
sitting there, isn't it?
Sailing above it. It was such a skillful thing to do.
He did when he wanted to do it, and
it wasn't the weight of the sound. Yeah, it wasn't the weight of the sound that did it. It was the vibrancy and the projection of it. It was hard to describe it, but it didn't dominate.
It's one of the things you got to work on to do. No. Well, but saying that, I used to give so much energy down the instrument. One of the real memories of going up to Black Dyke, because my dad used to take me up quite regularly. And we're talking, well, you were there then, Sandy, this would be sort of 1986, when it was Diversions again, Bourgeois. The little quartet at the start of the second movement there. Edge Park must have done that about 20 times. I could have listed that all night. There were Philip on principal cornet, yourself, Dave Pogson, and Cloughy, and it was absolutely wonderful. The sound was just amazing. And then the last movement, John. The power and energy used to get through that euphonium. Like, geez, it was just so exhilarating for me. I think I just want to play like that. It was just so much energy.
When I joined it, there was all these players you mentioned around the stand and others, and you just soaked it up. You just thought, right, this is how you do it, and nothing much was said. You would be told if you weren't doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But like you said, Simon, no praise was good praise, sort of thing, wasn't it? If they didn't say anything, they didn't say out about you, you were probably doing all right. But that was when you used to get the tap on the shoulder from Jacko behind me. And you turn around and the glasses would be down on his nose, and can I just have a word? I thought, oh
Yeah.
God, you
Here
know.
we go.
But if they weren't saying anything, it was probably decent news, you know. But you learnt so much from how these guys played, you know.
Yes.
But they were never, they never tried to stifle you. They never tried to pigeonhole you to play. They were quite happy for you to develop your own personality as a player,
I think the
as
thing is,
long
though,
as it
with
fitted in
Derek,
with the band.
with people like Derek and stuff, I mean, if Derek liked you and rated you as a player, you know, he'd give you so much time. You know, I mean, if he didn't, I mean, I know others that you know, he'd give him a hell of a time. You know, if he didn't rate you, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were quite a lot of us younger players joined at that time. There were Mark Frost, there were Simon at the time. You know, there were loads of us all joined at the same time. Rob Westacott, Lee Rigg. You know, a lot of young players that all came at the same time, didn't we? You know, I mean, that euphonium baritone row went from the oldest serving row to the youngest, because obviously John Slinger had just left and John Clough.
Yeah.
So and obviously Stuart Derrick and Peter Christian, both absolutely fantastic players, have been there. They've been there quite a long time anyway, since the 70s. But you know, there was that's the other thing. I mean, just sitting within that band, it was just so easy to play because they're such great players. I mean, Pete Christian,
That's
yourself,
one thing
Sandy,
I
all that,
remember. It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember going back to Whitburn when I joined the band, and it was about less than a year later, and I'd gone up and they said, you know, went out for a drink one night with the Whitburn lads, and they're saying, oh, you know, what's it like? What's it like? And it must be really hard. It must be hard. And I says, actually, thinking about it, it's quite easy, because you're not worried about anybody else. You just you could concentrate on your own thing. You weren't worried about, you know, oh God, is the bass trombone going to come in here, or you know, you know, in other bands you would have sort of certain things going on that you weren't sort of quite right. But in when you joined Dyke, you were just expected, and that was it. You could just concentrate on you, and in a lot of ways it was a lot easier. Yeah,
it wasn't like that in other bands, you know, because that's the thing with that band. It was, I mean, the quality of the players, and having such a Jeff Harrop on the E flat bass. I mean, God, because when it gets to a certain low range of the euphoniums, it's just carrying that sound all the way through, and it's just you'd never heard that kind of playing before, you know, before then, you know. And it was just fantastic, you know, such a great. And the thing is, as well, I think some of the sounds the band used to make were very special, you know, that you don't hear that so much now. The noise the band used to make, it was just so special, you know.
It was uniquely balanced, wasn't it?
It was just perfectly balanced. And again, that comes down to all the players being the same strength of players, you know, right down the team, you know. So there was no weak links there. It was, so everyone balanced.
It was also that when you auditioned, and they were proper auditions as well, the main criteria was always, what sort of noise do you make? You had to make the noise that fitted in with the band, you know, which wasn't about power. It was about the quality of the sound, you know, and they were always on about the quality of the sounds all the time. You know, that's what I found anyway, you know. So you mentioned there about one of your banding heroes being John Clough.
Yes.
What about any others that you were influenced by when you were growing up? Not necessarily euphoniums, anything at all.
Well, to be honest, I mean, euphonium-wise, I mean, Jeff, obviously, Jeff Whittam for start, through recordings more than anything was Jeff. I mean, there's always the big ones, aren't there, which was Trevor Groom and Lyndon Baglin, you know, for different. Trevor Groom and John. I thought Trevor Groom and John had a very similar sound, in fact, you know, to listen to, but both absolutely fantastic players. But then, to be honest as well, players like Derek Garside and Jim Shepherd, you know, and obviously Philip McCann. I mean, the lyrical playing of Philip was just, you know, there's no one better. It's just fantastic. So them sort of players always were the ones that sort of listened to a lot when I was younger, particularly John on euphonium.
Is that something that you encourage your young players to do these days? Or do you think that they actually do that anyway? Or do you have to push them towards that, about finding out about some of these legendary players and how they went about their business?
Well, I was always taught. I mean, I was quite lucky that I played at side of a lot of these players, which actually makes a big difference, because actually when you sat with them, It's a lot different to listen to recordings of them. I mean, I sat with John a lot, and other players like that, and it actually, it's, you know, I mean, players have to find their own style, but have to know what that style is. You know, often players don't know. You know, they've got to find their own style, but then add your own bit to that. You know. But you've got to have a sound image in your mind to start with. Mine were always John, like we're talking about the sort of riding the band thing. You know, I've not heard many players that can do that.
No,
Not like that. You know, it's quite well. It was very special. You know, for me. I mean, it was, you know, using the hair on the back of your neck stand up. You know, that sort of stuff. You know, I mean, I remember going to the concert I did at the Free Trade Hall, Journey to Freedom, the British Bandsman concert. You know,
yeah.
Just them octave G's at the end, and again, when you get in a big concert hall like that, you sit right at the back, and it literally just sails across the band, you know. And that's what I sort of tried to do, and that will, I guess, you get that sound image in your head, and that's what you want to, and that's what everybody has to do, is to get their own image in the mind, and then take it from there and put their own take on it, you know.
Do you ever point any of you young players towards that sort of thing? If there's some style of music comes up in your concert programs or a test piece and say, you know, you want to have a listen to such and such a body playing this or playing such a piece, that's how they...
Yeah, because I think, I mean, all the good players know all the recordings, they know the this, that, and the other, how so-and-so would play, and you know, I think you've got to know how things were played in the past, and then you can bring them into a more modern, you know, take on that, you know. But I think you've got to build on what was done in the past and then move it forward from there.
Yeah.
You know, things only move forward if you can do it as well as it was done in the past, and then add a bit on it. If it's not done as well as it was done then you're not really adding to it.
No,
you know,
I always found with the kids I taught at college for years and years, I always mention this story about Owen Farr. Owen came with this innate curiosity about all this stuff, you know, and it was surprising. Some players came to college with no idea who, you know, we used to do horn classes and I'd mention names like Derek Garside, and you might as well have said, you know, Jim McPherson. It could have been any, you know, they looked at you blank, you know, but then Owen knew all the Derek Garsides and the Norman Ashcrofts and the Lyndon Baglins and everybody, all of these players, you know, on all sorts of instruments. And it was no coincidence that he became the player he is, because he had this curiosity and this insatiable need
I think you learn something. I mean, for example, Simon was talking about Facilita earlier. Well, I mean, there you go for a start. I mean, Derek Garside's Facilita, with the clarity on some of that, I used to always try to emulate. Also, the old Jack McIntosh one, you know, which your father used to play me to death, you know, the old 70, it used to be really crackly on thing, you know, but again, the sounds, you know, it's 78 sound, but it did a lot of really stylistic things, which I used to copy as well, you know. So, and then you make it into your own performance, you know. It's not all theirs, but there are all these little elements in it. And if you think about it, actually, there's a bit of this, bit of that, and then you sort of put that all together, and then at least it's got a style, you know, of your own, and that's really what you're creating with that. And that's the same with band, you know, and players like the same with Owen. I mean, all good players have the same thing, you know. I always call it the 3 A's, you know, attitude, ability, and application, you know. And every good player has all three. The 3 A's, you know. I don't judge any players on that, you know, and all the best players I know have all three in bucket loads.
It does concern me sometimes these days that it's probably easier than ever with the internet and everything else to discover all these special players. And I wonder sometimes how many people actually do it, because it's such a great way to learn. And then add your own take on the top, you know. And I don't think.
But I go with that. I think sometimes, Sandy, though, I think sometimes with that, though, we get overloaded with too much stuff now. You know, I was listening to something the other day that talk about this, the fact that you can end up actually, we get so much information in a day now with everything we do that actually, you know, whereas one time we used to sit down and list something and just sit and list to it. Often now we're doing something else, or we're on the bounce, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. And actually, because we have all this stuff, I mean, you think about all the things on YouTube, and I mean, there's everything. I mean, literally, pretty much isn't anything you can't find. But because of that, we don't have the time, or we just get overloaded with this stuff, you know.
It's strange that, because I was just listening to something yesterday about that, about we don't really pay attention to it. This guy I was listening to was on about pop music. We don't really pay attention to its background. And I remember as a kid, going Jim Leggett, who is still at Fairies, fantastic bandsman. We were at school together. He was at the top end of secondary school. I had just joined. I was 4 or 5 years younger. But I used to go to Jim's house and we would sit and listen to these LPs that we had of all those old Decca Sounds of Brass series things. And we'd listen. And Andy Duncan and I were mates at school. We used to sit in Andy's house listening to Lyndon Baglin, strangely. Andy was on the baritone at the time. And Lyndon playing Grandfather's Clock and all this sort of thing, and that you would concentrate. There were no phones. We had nothing else to distract us. We would sit and listen to music. That was it. That's how you did it without, like you say, without the distractions of just putting it on your phone and having it in the background when you do the washing up or something.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that's a lot for players as well, is actually listening to something, because certainly as a conductor, I do a lot more listening now and actually sitting and actually listening to it properly, because it's so easy, like you said, just to put something on in the car as you drive, but you're not really listening, not properly.
No, that's true.
Listening to something, and you learn so much from that. Just listen. It's not just bands. I don't really listen to bands much at all, really. It's mainly sort of orchestral things and things like that. But you learn so much from them things by just listening. But listening properly, actually listening to it with proper intent. It's like, it's like a good book or anything like that. You've got to really properly digest it. And I think a lot of times we get so much info now, so much stuff thrown at us.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It gets it. It is tough sometimes.
Going back a step, Morgan.
Yeah.
Take you back to your early days at Black Dyke. Obviously, I think you were the youngest in the band for quite a while.
Well, I was 18 when I actually got the job. But if you remember, I got the job, and then I did the area with Hammonds.
I was just going to come on to that.
Yeah. So I was I'd just turned 19. So I did the area, and in fact, for quite a while, I was doing half a rehearsal at Black Dyke because we're doing the Festival of Brass, the first one ever did, and then also going down to Hammonds, and then, which was a bit surreal, playing principal Euphonium at Dyke, and then going to second year for Hammonds for the other part of the rehearsal. For the area.
I remember, Sandy will probably remember this from the meeting. I remember Jacko being really upset that you couldn't do the area with us.
All right.
And so he says, Freddie Ellis was secretary at the time, says, Freddie, ring Hammonds up, tell them they can have Bob Childs and a fiver, and we'll have Morgan.
That's quite generous from Jacko.
I know. Sorry, Bob, about that one, but it is quite true. I mean, it's just Jacko's sense of humour. I remember that they were desperate to get you in. I remember Pete Christian coming in the back, Sandy, and saying, "Right, Fred, sign him, get him signed on."
Yeah, once they made their mind up, they were. That was it, wasn't it?
It was though. I didn't. Obviously, I have so much respect for Jeff, and plus, Dan anyway would have actually killed me, if I didn't. Not that I wanted it anyway, but as you know, you didn't mess with Jeff.
No, you didn't.
But no, so I ended up doing it, which obviously Dyke went and won. Then on beating,
so the conductor at Dyke will have been David King, wouldn't it, when you got there?
Yes, Kevin Bolton, the first rehearsal I did. He was resident conductor.
Yes.
It was David, yeah, absolutely.
Kevin was such a good band trainer.
Wasn't he?
He was.
No nonsense, absolutely no nonsense. Basics, over and over until he was satisfied. It was great,
Yeah, fantastic, Kevin.
No mucking about.
No.
That band ended up quite a tidy outfit. I've noticed on Facebook recently we did a tour of Japan in 1990, and somebody's put up. It's a bit of a crackly recording, but you can still tell. And there's things on these concerts like harmony music, Essence of Time, and they're brilliant, And that Shostakovich Festive Overture, but it's
the
not
hard one.
It's
not the easy one.
It's Mike Antrobuty's one, which instead of being in F major is in E. So or in B flat with the horns. Yeah, the horns are in A and then in B major in the middle of it. But it doesn't sound any It doesn't sound like we're making heavy weather of it. But that was my Canterbury had arranged that. They were doing that when I joined the band. I think they just recorded it on that Russian Festival LP, and it was on, and that was it. We never rehearsed it. It was just that was it. You just get on and you play it. But it was hard because Mike Antrobus had arranged it in the actual key that Shostakovich wrote it in. He hadn't transposed it.
Sounds better, doesn't it?
It does. It does sound brighter. Yeah, it does. The key it does make a difference, but it's so hard. It's so hard. You know, there's no.
Well, that's been a concept all the time, that, isn't it? So the first contest that I did was the European, actually, on Esther Time.
Right. God, yeah, I forgot about that.
Again. Yeah. So
up in Falkland.
Yeah. I remember you were quite nervous behind stage.
Yeah.
We did. Essence of Time was the set piece. Harmony music was his own choice, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, again, I mean, harmony music then, as is now. I mean, still. I mean, you know, it's the top E. You know, it's not a high note now for Euphoniums, but I tell you what, if you put on a contest, I think most will. It's still a test. We played it about 3 times I think contest, and it doesn't get any easier. Put it that way.
No.
So,
Morgan, you've talked about playing players.
Yes.
What about the best conductors you've played for, and why?
Well, I mean, obviously we touched on just starting meeting with David King, of course. I mean, he were a massive influence on me generally. You know, I mean, a fantastic conductor. I mean, the thing with David as well, what he can do, which some can't at that level. He can take any level of band and actually massively improve it, you know, because he knew that right from taking Swinton when he took them right from the 4th section. I mean, I remember a conversation with him saying he took that band from 4th section to the British Open basically, and he had nearly 20 in that band that were in the 4th section band, you know. So
that's a true story.
It was,
there were 17 of them, I think, went all right through the sections, all taught by David.
Yeah.
That's astonishing. That's quite astonishing.
So, I mean, to be honest, then that sort of led on to, I mean, obviously after the Black Dyke, then it became YBS, obviously with David as well. So, I mean, David's been a massive influence on my playing, you know. And again, he were interested in listening to your podcast with Alan the other week about Elgar Howarth and going to his house and all this sort of stuff. And well, that's similar with David. I mean, the amount of times I've been there and, you know, listening to times and there's no sense of time whatsoever. You know, bring Euphonium over, we'll have a blow, you know, and it's like, it never seems like a lesson. We just play, you know, and he'll play, we'll listen to stuff and all that sort of thing. And it used to be fantastic, you know, it's really interesting. And like I said, the whole day would go and it'd be like 9 o'clock at night, you know, like, we better have some tea, you know.
You know, I only went over to David's once and it was to drop something off. And in his, I think it were a conservatory, I'm not sure, but it was a back room. He had this motorbike stood on its stand. And he says, well, what do you think to this, mate? And all of a sudden he jumped on it, kicked it up and started revving it away in the house. You've never seen smoke like it. Fumes everywhere.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
He never had any sense of time, though. I mean, I told the story a while ago on one of these about he used to phone you up at midnight.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd never get a sorry for ringing you. You always just got this bit at letter F, you know, where the cornets have this, and then he'd start playing. He'd be playing.
Yeah.
And then you've got this bit, and what do you think if you did this? And you know, you're thinking, David, midnight. Yeah. But what about this bit? And he was just like that. He was just sort of
so
slightly unhinged. He's on the cusp between that sort of madness and genius, isn't he? You know. But you cannot fault his. He is. I think he's one of the most passionately musical and innately musical conductors that we've had in the movement for God knows how long. You know,
it is. It's how it motivates you as well. He knows exactly how to push everyone's buttons, and you know, knows when to do. You know, and that was the one thing. I mean, he used to have a similar thing when he used to work at band supplies. He'd ring you up on the phone, you know, you couldn't get him off the phone. You know, in them days we had them phones with the delay on the phone, you know, the wireless phones, you know.
Yeah.
And you'd be in the shop and he'd be asking you to sing your part down the phone. You're like, oh God, I've got people in here, you know. And then, you're late. And it's like, you know, like the delay on the phone and all this sort of stuff, you know.
That just sounds like it, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, great stuff. But, so, I mean, David, definitely. I mean, I mean, obviously, well, we're getting to the YBS thing, but I mean, obviously, then when I left YBS, then we had Howard Snell at Fairies, so he was
Yeah,
very
there's
different
another.
today, but fantastic. I mean, and the interesting thing was, because he used to stay in Manchester, many a time, I spent quite a lot of time with him just chatting about that's time at the LSO and all this sort of stuff, and it was fantastic because I was also a big Leonard Bernstein fan, and I do ask him about Leonard Bernstein because I had to deal with him and all that sort of stuff
Yeah,
with the orchestra. And in Howard, I mean, he could be so economical, Howard, but the band
yeah,
would be out on fire, you know. I mean, partly due to the fact that it was Howard, because he was stood there. I mean, I guess it's similar to Elgar Howarth and conductors like I haven't played Elgar Howarth much, but certainly with Howard, you should stand there. I mean, I played this solo once, and the band's absolutely on fire, you know, and he's literally just ticking away there, and the band's just, it's all sitting around him. It's just amazing, you know, the intensity.
I remember. I think you're right. I mean, Elgar Howarth and Howard Snell.
Yeah,
I think they stand head and shoulders above
yeah,
most things in band in the last 30, 40, 50 years. I remember once at Grimy, he was conducting, I was playing. And because of the way the horns sit, you're looking straight across to the solo cornet bench. And Gary was he had his hands up towards his chest, quite close in. And he's a big, tall bloke, and he just leaned. I can't remember what we were playing, but he just leaned forward, the top half of his body, just leaned and sort of pushed forward slowly, and the band just went woof, just lifted, you know. And you thought, wow, that's control of a band. He did nothing. He wasn't being. He was never spectacularly, I don't know, flamboyant or sort of, playing to the crowd or anything like that. It was just all these little
Howard's
gestures.
the same. He just knew exactly what
Yeah.
to do. I mean, we did a festival of brass once, and actually one of the pieces, for some reason, we hadn't rehearsed it. And he just said to the back, he says, look, he says, we've got this piece to do. And he literally told us about it. He says, there's 3 corners in this piece, this, and this. Watch this. We just did 3 corners and literally performed it. And it was absolutely fantastic. He knew just exactly what he had to do and what the band had to do. And that was it. And he knew the rest of it would just take care of itself with that.
Again, you're talking about natural, very, very, very talented musicians.
Yeah.
None of it is contrived. None of it is learned. None of it is put on. It was just, they were so innately musical.
Yes.
In everything they did, that was just the way they were, you know. And it's
the other one really. I mean, the other one really. But then obviously Alan Withington we played with at Fairies as well. We did Masquerade and all that. I mean, and Alan was fantastic. You know, with Alan.
I did.
I think with Alan, he gave you so much space to play as a soloist, which I really liked. You know, I mean, if you're playing it well, he just knew to leave you alone and just, you know, his accompaniments were fantastic. You know, and he just knew how to get the best out of the band and all that sort of stuff. And I really enjoyed playing for Alan as well. You know, so there were 3 really. I mean, it's obviously I've played for others like Major Parks and on other things, but not regularly for him. I mean, the thing with the Major is just the charisma he had when he stood there. I mean, just that once the arms went up, I mean, the band just grew in stature straight away as soon as he stood there. You know, which was another. I know you guys played for him regularly. No, I didn't really. I sort of played for him sometimes, you know, but he was another fantastic musician, wasn't he?
Again, I mean, you've added another name, Alan Withington, onto the Elgar Howarth and Howard Snell, 3 professional trumpet players. Proper pros, right?
Yes.
It's no coincidence, is it?
No,
these guys with the experience outside the banding bring everything they've probably learned from. Well, you mentioned Howard Snell and playing for Bernstein.
Yes.
Right. So these guys, you know, Howarth, I know he had his heroes in orchestral conducting, and I'm sure Alan has as well, and they've soaked up what they've learned as well. You know, you're talking about people that are on a bit of a different level, aren't you?
Yeah,
really. Passing that on to the likes of us, you know.
I mean, Howard would say his favourite conductor, and we're asking was Leopold Stokowski.
Right.
And he said he was the only person that could change the sound of an orchestra. You know, he could just literally in 5 minutes just literally change the sound. He used to love Stokowski, yeah. And you've got to ask him that. That's what he said, yeah.
Just Morgan, through your career, has there been? There must have been loads. I mean, we've all got sort of memories of doing this, that, and the other. Is there any real standout moments? for you?
The contests or just generally?
Anything, just anything. Doesn't have to be a contest, no.
I mean, competition-wise, I mean, obviously, I mean, one of the first European was a fantastic experience with that. There's been loads actually. I mean, that was the Japan tour, because I mean, obviously that was my first tour. I was sort of youngest player on that trip, so that was amazing. And then moving on from that, I mean, the YBS days. I mean, again, that was an experience just from where the band was to where it ended up. I mean, the band was just such a great band that could play together they just played together so well, such good players, you know, and contest performances like. I mean, the Dove Descending was a particular, not a favourite at the time, I must say, because it was.
Well, I remember we did two. We won the Open on it, didn't we? And
That's right.
everything went swimmingly. And then we played it as an own choice at the European. And the tape, you know, the bird tweeting, it broke, didn't it, before we went on stage?
It did.
And so you had to go through the whole of that Euphonium solo on your Jack Jones.
Well, the thing with that as well was obviously with that, it was funny because at the Open we got accused of having a different tape because it was a CD actually, wasn't it? It was a CD.
Yeah.
But what David did, he listened to the whole length of that disc from beginning to end and worked out the gaps. So we had really big gaps in it. So we heard all the birdsong, which everybody else just got through it really quickly. So actually what happened was you heard more of the birdsong in ours than you did in anyone else. It was exactly the same disc. But obviously then at the European, that backfired on us because Richard was pressing this thing, would not play this CD. He's like literally panicking. But then obviously we had these massive gaps through the birdsong, and then obviously we didn't have the birdsong. So it was just stood there with these massive gaps.
We actually knew the machine had broken before we went on. We were literally ready to walk on. Yeah. And it were panic, wasn't it? Panic stations. And you were going through that solo, and it was impeccable.
It pressed it afterwards, didn't it? It pressed it afterwards, and it started. And he did press it at the performance, Richard. It didn't work, and he got off stage, pressed it, and it started. Yeah, so there you go.
Oh, wow!
Just sit and do the whole thing. So that were one of the. And then obviously when I went to Fairies with Masquerade, you know, I mean that was a Fairies piece. But I mean
that was one heck of a performance. Now, Morgan, me and Sandy have a regular award when we get players who at your level coming in, and we call it the Jeff Whittam moment.
All right.
And I'm going to say that yours has got to be Masquerade.
Yeah. Well,
would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about contest performances that you thought were going to win while you were playing them, and
yeah,
that actually that's probably the only one, and actually not due to the sort. I mean, obviously, I was just relieved to get the sort. I mean, there's a bit of a story behind that Masquerade because I mean, obviously, Masquerade came out in 1993. Well, you guys won it, didn't you, with Fairies?
Yeah, yeah.
And at the time, I'd left Dyke and gone back to Hammonds. And to be honest, at the time, I wasn't in the form I should have been a month or another. And this piece came out, and really caught me out, to be honest, on the day. And I didn't play as well as I should have done a month or another. And because of that, when it came out the second time, literally I thought there was no way I'm going to mess this up. So literally 6 months before I was out running on the road, because Fred Ellis used to go training, used to get his heart rate up and all this sort of stuff. So we're doing this, we're absolutely putting the time in. So, and also then jumps, which are difficult, you know, to play it without tonguing the notes at all, you know, so you're not going to split them and all that sort of stuff. So literally, I'd absolutely put everything to that. I thought there's no way that's going to happen again.
Morgan, is it myth or legend? But Philip Wilby used to pop into the shop at Band Supplies with a bit of manuscript and ask you to try little bits, but you didn't know what it were for at the time.
Well, I have seen it. Yes, that's true. That because when it first came out, Philip came into the shop and brought this. He says, "Is this possible on the Euphonium?" But at the time, I thought, I'm not going to. I don't know what this is for. Well, I won't probably end up playing it. Someone else will probably get to play it somewhere. So I said, "Oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, but no problem at all." And it was the jumps in Masquerade, you know, D to the D, and it was that. And the next phone call was Nige Field, and he goes, "I've just heard Philip Wilby's writing the open test piece." I'm like, I think I've just seen it. And true enough, it was Masquerade.
It's the fix.
So you'd obviously gone back to Hammonds when that was out in '93.
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Right, and Hammonds then morphed into YBS, didn't they?
Well, yeah, well, at that time, because actually Jeff didn't take us on that. It was Major Marshall, David Marshall.
Right.
He took us on that. So he sort of, and then just after that, at least just after that, Hammonds then lost the sponsorship.
Yeah.
And then basically it was Fred Etherington, actually, whose funeral's been today, actually, would you believe?
Oh, wow. Bless him.
Yeah, it was Fred, yeah, bless him, that actually got the sponsorship with a guy called Roger Suddards, who was at Yorkshire.
I remember that name.
Remember him, yeah. And it went from there, really, yeah. And then after that, Jeff was there a little while, but then they appointed Nick Childs as resident and David. And King. And that's really, I mean, after Dyke, I hadn't seen David since then, you know. And then obviously they transformed the band from then, really.
Because it weren't the best band in the world by any means, was it, when we first started in '94? I remember I came in from winning the double with Fairies. And I must admit, I had a few moments where I thought, what have you done?
Well, I mean, you know, to be honest, it was it's like anything else. These things seem like overnight successes, but they're not. I mean, we're stuck. I mean, I was with the band in the first period for 10 years. And I mean, when we started, it was really, you know, there's a lot of players in and out and one thing or another to start with. But also it took a while to build to get to the players that really fit in with the ethos of the band and David and what it was trying to build. You know, and we also had issues with corners, really, didn't we? I mean, the sort of lower end, flew end down was always pretty strong. But again, I mean, in them days, we Billy Rushworth was solo horn when we started, and players like that. And then eventually that really left and it became Shona. But I mean, Shona was only very young when she started, of course, you know.
Well, I've got to say, when Shona came in, I think that was quite pivotal to the band becoming really quite successful. Along with Peter Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
When Pete came in, it was a game changer.
Well, them two, because we also did a strong band, because with Ewan, obviously, who was just a flugel player. But you see, if you remember when we won the first Open in 97, well, 98 it became, the Princess Diana's funeral. But in that meantime, Pete Roberts joined and Nick Hudson on solo trombone. Yep. And I do believe that just gives us that edge. Well, it definitely gave us that edge, you know, that we wouldn't have had actually. If the contest had taken place when it should have done, it could have been a different prospect. But them two players came in, give the band such. And to be honest, the two areas where we just needed to be a little bit stronger, and well, ended up being a massive amount stronger. I mean, Pete was unbelievable, wasn't he? I mean, the points used to pile on. My goodness, in a contest.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But so obviously after YBS, she went over to Fairies, did quite well there, and then I remember you came back to YBS for a short period, but it was when we lost the sponsorship.
That's right. Yes, in a bit of following around that.
In fact, I think it was your first day back that we got told that they'd lost the sponsorship or something, wasn't it?
Well, Fairies lost theirs when I joined as well, so it must be me there.
So you know, that was a bit of a disaster, but you stuck with it, and along with a lot of others, and eventually Richard Evan came into conductors, didn't he?
That's right.
And because David had left,
yes,
I think he took a bit of a sabbatical, but Richard took us for a couple of contests, and actually we didn't do too bad, did we?
No, we got fifth at the Open.
Yeah.
I think we got fourth at London.
Yeah,
but I was still playing then, obviously, because
that's right. But then you were made MD that shortly after that.
Well, if you remember, because I mean, really, the band was on the point it was going to fold. Really, you know,
it was,
point, wasn't it? And you know that couldn't happen. I mean, I've been associated with the band since 1988. You know, and my family has as well. You know, and obviously with Jeff as well. You know, and it, not just that. Too big a band name to disappear, you know, bands like that can't disappear. And I remember us having a conversation that, you know, if we go back, we'll keep it going, you know, and obviously that's been a long process, really. I mean, that's gone from that. I mean, the band, you know, we had to replace players, and that wasn't easy and that's why we changed the name really as well, because of this YBS tag on the band, you know, which to be honest was a pressure on. It was awful for me because in a lot of ways, I was part of the building the YBS tag.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the players that were coming in weren't, and maybe weren't up to that sort of level. Well, they weren't, but they were keeping the band where we were at that time, and we had to rebuild the whole thing. I mean, the band eventually went down into the first section, and same with the Grand Shear. We were in the senior cup, the middle one at one point,
Yeah.
and obviously over that time though, then it's been built back up now to where we are now.
I mean, it's great testament to yourself, Morgan, that you stuck through that, through literally thick and thin, because I, for one, know that financially and everything, you had problems everywhere, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
And you had some great help from who was the old chairman? What was his name?
Oh, John Miles, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, John.
Lovely
Yeah.
fella. You had a lot of help from him and wisdom, and and now, do you feel that the band's ready to push again?
It is, yeah. I mean, the thing is, obviously, it was interesting with COVID. I mean, most bands struggle through COVID. I mean, naturally, we came out of COVID actually stronger because obviously straight after COVID, we signed Kirsty, of course, on Principal Cornet, and Alan Morrison, which at the time before that, you couldn't have ever thought of that ever happening.
Right.
But it did, which is, and I mean, them two players coming in, I mean, it's just give the band such a boost. As long as ever since as well, then it's attracted other players. I mean, Cornets were always hard to find, but not anymore. I mean, not now. Kirsty and Alan came, because they're both such fantastic players. And again, it's that attitude they bring as well. And really, it's just fill the ranks up from there with quality players.
You've got quite a few ex-YBS players in there, isn't there? There's John Davis and Darren West on the bass team.
Yeah.
My friend, the Baldy, Mike Walsh. And you've got Nick Lees and Paul Dale.
Oh yeah.
On back row. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They're all incredibly strong players.
Yeah, it's a terrific back row, and Chris Benton is there as well. So I mean, that is it's a really strong back row team. He's out now. As good as any, really. And that's thing. And just recently, then we've had quite a few new players in as well. We've got a new Euphonium, Daniel from Germany, who's brilliant. And
you're quite excited about him, aren't you?
Well, yeah, because again, the thing is, he has that attitude that we were talking about earlier that we used to have, where he was so keen on everything, and Leslie, you mention anything, he's listened to it, he knows all the stuff, and he's such a fabulous player, and a sponge as well, so anything you throw at him, he's heard it or he'll listen and he'll try and adjust his playing. We can work together all the time, which is fantastic, which is really great.
Well, they couldn't get a better mentor.
Well, hopefully.
Morgan, tell us a bit about your general philosophy then, music-wise, with the band, because you do have, I would say, these days it's a slightly unique take on the sort of repertoire you play. But what's your theory behind it?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I'll only play quality music. I mean, that's the main thing for me. It's got to be, I mean, there's the old saying, I think it was George Sell used to say, that there's no old and new music, just good and bad.
Yeah.
And that's very true. And that's very true. What Duke Ellington, what was it, the good stuff and the other stuff, and really. And that's it, and we always play quality music with the band, and I'm just pushing the band all the time with quality repertoire, and it massively shows, I mean, that was one thing when I did join Fairies, because the repertoire they were playing before I joined there, they were doing a lot of dance band stuff and all this sort of thing, but nothing where the band could really develop the sound and all that sort of stuff, and balance and all these sort of things. Mm-hmm. And same with YBS. I mean, the band sound David built there was built on the Salvation Army repertoire. I mean, we did a lot of Salvation Army repertoire, the 3 discs there we did. But I mean, that actually was fantastic for the band, and we play a lot of that as well, because it really gets the band sounding well. It gets from listening to each other, get the harmonies, the balance, all this sort of stuff. So I mean, I'm always
notation-wise, Morgan. It's written in the correct ranges for the instruments. That's
a big
thing.
Well, that's like Gordon Langford, isn't it? He doesn't write anything out of range.
No.
Yeah.
Ever.
But, I mean, when Alan did his podcast, he mentioned about Gordon Langford and Howard Snell. He says that you get some Howard Snell stuff out. Now, I think there is a reason why, and those are quite easily some of the best arrangements ever done for band.
Yeah.
And they really pushed the boat out when they were done, and it was some fantastic arrangements. There is a reason why they're not played so much these days. And pretty hard for most.
They're too difficult. Yeah, I mean,
the Howard Snell stuff is difficult.
It is very.
Well, the thing is, I mean, there can be little throwaway numbers, really, but actually to play them, it takes so much work to do it. And the thing is, that is how the band improves, by putting that time in and spending that time on these pieces. And like I say, it might be a 2-minute thing, like putting on the Ritz, for example, but it's actually really difficult to play.
Yeah.
It's really
so
hard,
precise. And really, it's a 2-minute throwaway piece for an audience, but actually it's not. But it really improves your band because everybody in the band is interested. Everyone's got stuff to play. There's no one sat not doing anything in them arrangements. Literally, the whole band is involved from start to finish playing. And rhythmically, they're challenging. They're not, it's not a formulaic stuff whatsoever, which we seem to be getting quite a lot of now. It's all, everything's in 4/4 these days, a lot of the time. And actually, we don't playing different time signatures and things like that. And actually, a lot of that, then the bands become de-skilled because we don't do it.
Well, don't you think there's a lot of it is, you're saying that everything's in 4/4. I think what you're getting at is they're all in these. It's a specific tempo. It sets off and it just bangs away at the same tempo all the time, right?
Yes.
So you don't need a conductor. You just need a metronome.
No.
This sort of elastic music,
yes,
right? Like putting on the Ritz or a lot of Howard's other stuff, where everybody has to be clued in and moving about and moving together and being aware of each other and all that sort of thing. We had it a bit earlier in the year with things like High Peak. That caused massive problems because the music was so elastic.
Yes.
And players aren't used to it now because a lot of the concert repertoire is just a bit banal and a bit superficial. Howard's stuff is certainly never superficial.
No. This is it.
And this elasticity makes the band listen to each other, makes everybody clue into the conductor and to their colleagues all around the stand. I just think it's such a valuable tool to improve a band.
It is, and I mean, we do a lot of that stuff at Hammonds, and that's successful because of the stableness of the band.
Yeah.
Because that isn't always the case these days, that you've got stable personnel. I mean, but we're going back to the Black Dyke Fair, these things. I mean, we didn't have depths, did we? There wasn't any.
No.
We didn't. I mean, and same with me. My commitment's total to what I do. I mean, like with Hammonds, whatever. I mean, I can literally count on one hand the amount of rehearsal I've missed ever. And because you just don't miss, you give your full commitment to something. And the thing is, when everyone gets used to playing together as a group and as a team, that's what it's all about. And you can play these things, whereas it's actually not that easy, this elastic music, when obviously you've got the holes or players missing and all this sort of stuff. It makes it much more difficult.
It does. I've conducted bands where you have a library full of fantastic music and you couldn't play a lot of the bespoke stuff because every time you got to a concert, you had 6, 7, 8 deps who,
yes,
with the best will in the world, can't read all this sort of stuff.
No.
Blind eye, and so you can't do it, But we, like you say, going back to the times when we all started with Dyke, I think I did 11 years in my first stint at Dyke. I missed one rehearsal and one job. I missed a job for my sister's wedding, and I missed one rehearsal because I was poorly.
Yeah,
and that was in 11 years.
Yeah,
and I wasn't unusual. I cannot remember having depths at Dyke.
We didn't really. I mean,
it's different days these days. I know it is. I know it's different, but that was a luxury we had, that we could play whatever we wanted because you had the same personnel every time.
But that's the thing. I mean,
that's Hammonds, yeah.
Well, that's it, and it means now that I can, we've got a really solid, settled team, and it means then you can play, like like the more challenging stuff by Howard. You know, we do a lot of Repertoire arrangements. Again, all good arrangements. You know, all good arrangers. But and also, you know, there's a lot of good new stuff as well. Just harking back to the old music. I mean, again, there's a lot of good European music. You know, some really good composers there. We've been doing quite a few there, and some really fantastic stuff there as well. You know, pushing the band forward. But it's nice actually to see more lyrical playing though as well, rather than just the technical stuff, which we seem to be getting. That seems to be just becoming the be all and end all now. And it's a shame because, you know, we will lose that if we don't have both. You know, we do have to have the challenging technical things. You know, that has to be there. And obviously, like a contest, the element of has to have this. It's got to be a high wire event. You know, it is a challenge. It's got to be that as well. But also musically, it's got to be satisfying and it's got to be good. You know, and you know when you get a good piece of it.
Yeah, I often wonder if sometimes we're in this sort of rut of, especially the top test pieces that are getting touted around, that they are a bit formulaic and a bit. Just wonder sometimes that if we're trying to attract people in music festivals and the BBC and stuff to broadcast more band music, if they say, right, okay, show us what's the current state of play repertoire wise, and if we play some of these pieces to the BBC or to big music festivals, they laugh us off the stage because it's just banal, superficial stuff with not a lot of music in. Sometimes, you know, we're in a bit of a, we seem to be heading up a little bit of a cul-de-sac sometimes. I mean, just on that sort of point, what do you think the current problems are in banding? You've mentioned a couple already, but you know, is there any you are particularly worried about, or things that you might think you have a good solution for, as far as just general banding things are concerned?
We just seem to be a bit of a crossroads with a few things at the moment. I mean, I just feel generally the movement just needs to look after itself more, and where we're actually heading as a movement. You know, because you know there is generally this feeling that we're falling behind to Europe. You know, definitely. And why that is, you know, we need to address that. But I think a lot of it as well, because the contests the way they are, there's always this thought that, you know, because there's always this competition element, but we do have to think about the movement as a whole and actually work together better, I think, sometimes, which possibly we don't do as well as we could do, you know. And there just seems to be more cooperation when you look at the European bands, you know, there just seemed to be that as a general thing. And I think going forward, we need to have more of that. So we are all singing off the same hymn sheet going forward and thinking about the same things and thinking about developing our own players. That's really important, you know, because obviously we get a lot of players coming from contests here, there and everywhere, but it's not then developing our own players in this country. And that is really important because players like myself, when I was younger, got the chance to play at Black Dyke when I was 19, you know, but if we find people in, then does that happen? You know, and we've got to look at the long term, not just the short term. You know, again, I mean, the Burley bands I play have had a lot of experience and a mix of youth, and I get that Hammonds really. You know, there's some really good experienced heads in there which you need, but also a lot of younger players, and that's really important. You know, that we bring the youth players through because they don't let you down. They'll always get better. They'll always improve. You know, and they're the future of what we're doing. And then when we go to these European contests, you know, we're back in the game again, you know, because sometimes now we're not really, whether we like it or not.
I mean, it is something we've talked about a fair amount, about the need to start sort of saying we're going to have homegrown players in homegrown contests. Otherwise, it's not doing banding any good in this country. And it's maybe one of the reasons that we are falling behind. You know,
I think it definitely is because, you know, again, players aren't getting the chance to play at the level, you know, and unfortunately, you know, sometimes it's seen just because it's a short-term thing for one contest, but we've got to see further than that. We've got to see where the band, you know, and it is a long-term thing, you know, and we've got to see more long-term, you know, it's like with Hammonds. I mean, you know, we've gone through that period of going right down to whatever section, but we've built the band back and hopefully built it back on the right things, you know, and the right people, and it actually does attract the right people eventually to what you want to do, because you've got the right ethos of what you wanted to do, and you know, and we're all in it for each other, and the band work really well together. They all love doing it, they all enjoy it. You know, we play good music, so they enjoy doing that together. You know, and that's what it's about. You know, that's what we're about, and it attracts. You know, and the guys enjoy it, and we all enjoy it, and that's what it's about. But we've got to really do that, and again work together as a movement. I think more than we probably do, and that's difficult. You know, but I don't think we do sometimes. We're thinking about short-term gains rather than thinking about the long-term picture of where we want to be, and it's going to take a few years. You know, but
I mean, I think we mentioned it in a previous one about there are too many people seem to be too concerned with what's my band going to get out of it, rather than or what am my band going to get out of it, or what are we going to lose out on if I agree to this? When we should be saying, what's the best for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to see there are too many vested interests, that we need to see the bigger picture in lots and lots of different things. You know.
Yeah, support these things. You know, I mean, you know, the other week we talked about the youth bands and things like that. You know,
yeah.
I mean, that's so important now. You know, because of where things are in schools at the moment, that's not going to get any better anytime soon. You know, so bands like Elland and I know about that because obviously my two kids play there. You know, and the work that Sam does there.
Oh,
you know,
it's incredible.
Well, this is it. You know, and it takes a lot of doing. You know. But I mean, that's where these players are going to come from, and that's where they're going to get interested in it. And you know, like I said, I know from my two, you know, I mean, they're keen as hell, you know, because they're inspired there to do that.
But it's not just, I mean, likes of Elland, it's not just the musical strength they have; it's the organisational strength they have as well, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the whole setup from top to bottom.
Other things as well. I mean, that, you know, because I mean, Sam commissions a lot of new music as well and things like that, which again is so important. You know, I mean, I know it's difficult commissioning works, you know, because not everyone is going to be a masterpiece. You know, as someone said to me recently, you know, everyone has a piece of artwork in the house, but they're not all the Mona Lisa. You know, and it's very true, but you have to go through all the artworks to get a Mona Lisa. I mean, this is the thing, really. And you know, we have to commission lots of new music to get to that point. And you know, Sam does that a lot at Elland. You know, so they're always playing new repertoire, which is great, and it's great for the kids to love it. You know.
So, Morgan, if you don't mind, there's just one question I really want to ask. When you've been either playing or conducting and you've been midway through a piece, have you ever thought, we're going to win this?
Well, saying earlier, I mean, Masquerade's probably the one that springs to mind. And like I said, it wasn't the Euphonium solo, but we got that out of the way. But it got to the little bit after that. And I don't know whether you've had this, but you get odd times in a contest performance, and it's only happened twice, I think, that suddenly the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You think, oh my goodness. And there was one little moment where it was really quiet, and then the horns coming on this this bit in Masquerade. It was just, and the atmosphere. The atmosphere there, the band was so quiet and just made the hair stand up. My goodness, and that rarely happens. I think the only other time was when we were playing Journey to Freedom and Derek Jackson did something, and he could do something on that. He just played some pedal note or something. And and he knew he'd got. He used to look round over his glasses at you like he used to do. And like, oh my goodness. And he used to every time, and he used to make the hair stand up on your back of your neck. So that's probably that one really stands out, I think, more than any of the others. I mean, there's obviously a lot of others. I mean, there's a lot of the great performances, but that particularly, I think, for that.
So, what actually keeps you so passionate these days? Because it comes over.
Well, I just a love of music, making good music with, you know, with great musicians, and I've just been brought up with it, really, and just you look at music making, you know, with and just helping people be the best they can be, you know. I mean, that's our ethos at the band, really, you know. I mean, where that takes us, if we're the best we can be, well, you know, winning is a byproduct of that, you know, because that comes along with it. But the most important thing, you know, for me as well, there's winning contests, but that again is a byproduct of the band playing really well, you know, and playing good repertoire and all these other things. And I think that's really, really important. In fact, I think that's most important, you know, is the musical things we're saying and how we actually saying something. Because always as a player, what you're playing, does it actually convey anything to the audience, and you know, and
Yeah.
what we actually say musically and all these things, because that's a much higher level than just winning a contest. You know, there's various contests can be won for various reasons, but you know, the ones that stick in your mind, are the performances that stick in your mind, are always the ones that were really emotionally quite special, you know, and that's something a bit different. And again, it's that what you put into it, and that's what I always try to sort of impart to the players, you know, that there's never any dull moments in any piece. You give your all the time, you know, and I've always done that, whatever it is, you know. I never come to rehearsal and think, well, I'm just having a lazy night tonight. That's just not, it's not in my head whatsoever. You know, we go to work, we do to give us best. And if everybody always does that to the maximum, then you're going to have a good band, you know, and you're going to have a good performance at whatever level you're at, you know.
Yeah.
Morgan, just a final question, and we have asked this of 2 or 3 people, guests we've had on, and it's something we based a podcast on quite a few weeks ago now. What constitutes a championship section standard band?
Well, I mean, well, firstly, quality of players, isn't it? You've got to have, you know, strength in depth in players, which is also about the sound, and a lot of it's actually the top bands just do the basics really well. You know, they just do the basics well, and it's a good sounding band, it's balanced, they do all the things right, and a lot of it's just down to the quality of your players, and then obviously how well you can play the repertoire as well, isn't it? Because I mean, if you're not, you know, you're at the level you're at due to what you can actually, what your band can actually play, but really play, you know, because I think these are, well, we played this, well, there's playing it and playing it. You know, there's really playing. And there's a big difference, you know. I mean, actually really playing something takes sometimes years to play a piece. I mean, we've played pieces and I still don't feel we know them, you know, because you know, masterworks, Passion Tree, for example, there's one piece, you know, that I played that 5 times, and every time I play it, you find something else in it, you know. But it's that depth of a piece, and then with bands, you know, it's they've got to be that. It's the standard, really, of the players, isn't it? I guess it comes down to.
Okay, Morgan. So that's been absolutely fantastic. A great insight into all things relating to yourself and the band at Hammonds. You really are a credit to Hammonds, bringing them, sticking by them when they lost the sponsorship, bringing them back up. There's so much hard work gone into that. I actually know firsthand about that.
Yeah, well
so,
done, mate.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much, Morgan, for coming on. This is it's been a real pleasure to have you in the room, so to speak. So I hope all the listeners enjoy this latest episode of Smith and Grezzy, and please tune in next time. Thank you.